Welcome to Made, the show about building yourself through grit, failure, and perseverance. This is Seth, and today we're talking about what I think to be one of the absolute best success stories that I've personally ever heard. I came across this, maybe 8 to 10 years ago through an audiobook, just the story of Soichiro Honda, who we all know is the creator of the vehicle Honda. This story to me just illustrates the importance and just the gravity of perseverance, persevering through really, really tough times. I remember reading the story for the first time and just being like super inspired to just keep going. Like no matter what obstacle I face, no matter what catastrophe I face, it's never going to be as bad as Soichiro Honda had. So what are my excuses? Why am I not willing to push through these super trivial, super menial circumstances that pose as obstacles in my life? So I hope that by talking about this story that you can kind of get the same sense that I got, where you evaluate your own situation and you learn that, you know what, my life's not that bad. And if I really want something, I will do whatever it takes to get there. So without further ado, let's get into the story of Soichiro and how he built Honda. I want you to think back to the last time that you faced a major setback. Maybe you got fired from your job. Maybe your business collapsed. Maybe you had a relationship that fell apart. In those moments, we're faced with a critical choice to either give up or to push forward. Most of us, if we're just being honest with ourselves, will find a comfortable middle ground. We'll move on, but we'll often dial back our ambitions and we'll just tell ourselves, maybe I was reaching too high, or maybe I didn't really want it that bad after all. But there are some people who seem to be built just a little differently. People who treat catastrophic failure as nothing more than data or information. They treat it like a stepping stone. Today's story is about one of those people. It's a man who was rejected, bombed, literally, bankrupted multiple times, and yet still kept moving forward with this almost irrational persistence. This is a man who built one of the most successful companies in history despite having almost no formal education. I'm talking about Soichiro Honda, the founder of Honda Motor Company, or as we all know it, Honda. What makes this story so powerful isn't that Honda succeeded, it's how he succeeded. He did so by embracing failure as an essential part of innovation. Kind of like Thomas Edison, who said, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was just an invention with 1,000 steps." What I like about Honda's story is that it didn't start in Silicon Valley or with a trust fund. It didn't have any startup capital or angel investors. It started in poverty in rural Japan at the beginning of the 20th century. Born in 1906 in a small village called Komyo, Soichiro was the son of a blacksmith and bicycle repairman. His father, Geye, ran a small shop where he fixed bicycles and occasionally worked with farm equipment. His mother, Mika, was a weaver who supplemented the family's meager income. It was humble beginnings, but one that would shape Honda's future in ways that no one could have predicted. From his earliest years, Honda was fascinated by machinery. He wasn't interested in books or traditional education. He was just interested in how things worked. There's this story about a young Soichiro that tells you almost everything you need to know about his character. When he was just 7 years old, he saw his first car. It was a Ford Model T, and it was driving through his village. And instead of being impressed by the status symbol or the speed, Honda dropped to his knees and smelled and touched the oily puddle that the car left behind. That is not a normal reaction for a kid, but as we'll soon come to learn, Honda wasn't a normal kid. School was torture for him. He was so disinterested in academics that he regularly forged his dad's signature on report cards just so he can hide his bad grades. This wasn't a kid who was going to thrive in an established system. He needed something different. At 15, Honda made a decision that would change his life forever. He left home with virtually no formal education and moved to Tokyo to become an apprentice at Art Shokai, an auto repair shop. His first job was cleaning the floors. Not fixing engines, not even helping the mechanics, just sweeping up the place after everyone else had done the real work. But here's where Honda's character really shines through. Instead of being resentful about his menial role, he threw himself completely into it. He just looked at this as the first step on a journey. He was there to learn, not to have his ego stroked. His mentor, a man named Yuzo Sakakibara, noticed this dedication. Over time, Honda earned more responsibilities. He learned to repair automobiles by doing the work, not by reading the manuals. By 21, Sakakibara trusted Honda enough to let him manage his own branch of the auto repair shop. Just think about that for a second. A kid with barely any formal education was running an auto repair shop at age 21. This wasn't because of connections or privileges. This is because Honda had developed an intuitive understanding of machines that most formally educated engineers could not match. But Honda wasn't content just fixing other people's machines. He wanted to build. His first major entrepreneurial venture came in the late 1930s when he founded Tokai Seikai, a company that manufactured piston rings for engines. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting because Honda did something here that most of us would consider really humiliating. He took his first batch of piston rings to Toyota, hoping to become one of their suppliers. The verdict? They rejected 47 out of 50 of his piston rings. 47 out of 50. Most people would have gone back to doing what they knew. They would have gone back to the repair shop or just got a job. But Honda? No. Honda enrolled himself in a technical school. This was a grown man with a business sitting in classrooms to learn metallurgy alongside teenagers. If you don't know, metallurgy is the study of properties of metals and their production purification. He studied the chemistry and the physics of metals because he wanted to understand why his piston rings that he'd taken Toyota failed. Not just how to fix them, but fundamentally he wanted to understand the principles behind the failure. After 2 years and countless experience, Honda finally perfected his manufacturing process. Toyota, they became a customer. So did Nakajima, which was an aircraft company. Honda's company, Tokai Seikai, grew to employ 2,000 people. This was success by any measure, and things were finally looking good for Honda. But then, World War II changed everything. Imagine building something from nothing, finally achieving success, and then watching it literally go up in flames. This is what happened to Honda when American B-29 bombers targeted his factory in Yamashita in late 1944. He was bombed not once, but twice. The bombings destroyed almost all of his manufacturing capacity. Machinery reduced to scrap, buildings flattened, and years of progress gone in minutes. But Honda, being Honda, was undeterred. With steel being diverted for armaments, he scavenged what he could. He noticed that the US Air Force pilots would discard their used gasoline cans, so he collected them and he used the metal to repair his factory, referring to these scraps of metal as little gifts from President Truman. I wish I could tell you that this is where the catastrophe ends and life gets better for Honda, but just as he began rebuilding and clawing his way back, nature struck an even harsher blow. On January 13th, 1945, a massive 8.1 magnitude earthquake devastated central Japan and completely wiped out Honda's reconstructed manufacturing plant. Honda was now entirely out of business. And just to make matters worse, the Japanese government, who were super desperate to control all industrial production for the war effort, seized the remaining assets of his company. They didn't ask, they simply just took control, leaving Honda with almost nothing to show for years of innovation and hard work. So, there's Honda, approaching 40 years old. His life's work literally in ruins around him. Now, the easy path would have been to rebuild a smaller version of what he'd lost, or just go back to working at an auto shop. Playing it safe. Instead, Honda sold the salvageable remains of his company to Toyota, and he took the money to start something completely new. A year later, in 1946, he founded the Honda Technical Research Institute, which was the predecessor to the Honda Motor Company. His new focus? Attaching surplus military engines to bicycles to create motorized transport for a war-devastated Japan where fuel and vehicles were scarce. He literally went around buying small generators that had been used for military radios and retrofitted them to power bicycles. The first prototype of this endeavor had a pretty ridiculous name. It was called the Chimney. Why, you might ask? It's because it belched smoke and fumes. It was loud, it was crude, but it worked. And it gave people mobility in a country where transportation and infrastructure had been decimated due to the war. As demand grew, Honda faced a new problem. He ran out of surplus engines, so what did he do? Well, in typical Honda fashion, he just designed his own. The true first Honda engine was a 50cc two-stroke engine called Type A, which he attached to a bicycle frame. They called it the Bada Bada for the sound that it made. Was it elegant? No. Was it perfect? Definitely not. But it met a crucial need at a crucial time, and more importantly, it got Honda back into the game as a manufacturer, not just a repairman. By 1949, Honda produced its first ever complete motorcycle called the Dream Type D. It wasn't an overnight success. In fact, the Dream Type D had a two-stroke 98cc engine that was noisy and pretty unreliable. But Honda kept refining. They kept improving. Then came the breakthrough that would define Honda's business for decades: the Super Cub. Introduced in 1958, the Super Cub featured a four-stroke 50cc engine that was quieter, more fuel-efficient, and more reliable than anything else on the market. It had a step-through frame that made it accessible to everyone, including women in skirts. Honda marketed it with the slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda," deliberately distancing itself from the rough, outlaw image of motorcycles at the time. The Super Cub would go on to become one of the most produced motor vehicles in history, with over 100 million units manufactured. But even with the success, Soichiro Honda, he just wasn't satisfied. He set his sights on international racing, specifically the Isle of Man TT, which was the most prestigious motorcycle race in the world. In 1959, Honda entered the Isle of Man TT for the first time, and the results? Disastrous. The bikes could not compete with European machines, but again, Honda saw failure as data. So by 1961, Honda motorcycles won the 125cc and 250cc classes. By 1966, they had conquered the premier class of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. These weren't just vanity projects, okay? Honda believed that racing improved the breed. The technological advances made on the racetrack filtered down to the consumer products, making them better, more reliable, and more efficient. With motorcycles established as a global success, Honda turned his attention to automobiles. And once again, he faced skepticism and setbacks. His first production car, the T360 mini truck released in 1963, was followed by the S500 sports car. But the real challenge came with the development of the H1300 sedan, where Honda's insistence on using an air-cooled engine against the advice of its engineering team resulted in a commercial failure. Now, this is a crucial moment in the story of Honda because it shows another side of innovation and leadership: the ability to admit when you're wrong. Despite his strong personality and clear vision, Honda eventually realized his mistake and allowed his team to develop water-cooled engines for future models, including the Civic, which would become one of the most successful car lines in history. The first generation Civic, launched in 1972, came at the perfect time, just as the 1973 oil crisis hit. With its fuel-efficient engine that met emissions standards without a catalytic converter, the Civic established Honda as a serious competitor in the global automotive market. Throughout all these ventures, Honda maintained a unique leadership philosophy that emphasized practical experience over academic credentials. He was known to walk the factory floor, talking directly with workers and oftentimes getting his hands dirty to solve problems. There's this great story about Honda visiting one of his factories and noticing a stain on the floor. Instead of ordering someone to come clean it up, he got down on his hands and knees and just cleaned it up himself. When an embarrassed manager asked why he would do such a thing, Honda replied, "I just wanted to see if it was oil or water." This wasn't just for show. Honda genuinely believed that understanding came from direct engagement with problems. He famously said, "Action without philosophy is a lethal weapon. Philosophy without action is worthless." Honda's approach to failure was equally pragmatic. He once said, "Many people dream of success. To me, success can only be achieved through repeated failure and introspection. In fact, success represents the 1% of your work that results from the 99% that is called failure." This philosophy even extended into the way that Honda's buildings were constructed. The Honda Oyama building in Tokyo was designed with movable interior walls so that the workspace can be reconfigured as needs changed, a physical manifestation of Honda's belief in flexibility and continuous improvement. By the time Honda retired from active management in 1973, he had built a company that embodied his principles of innovation, quality, and resilience. He had gone from a poor boy with little formal education to one of the most successful industrialists in history. But perhaps one of the most telling aspects of Honda's character was his attitude towards his own success and achievements. When he was awarded the Order of Culture by the Emperor of Japan, one of the highest honors in Japanese society, Honda initially refused to wear the formal mourning coat that's required for the ceremony. He relented only when it was pointed out that his refusal might be seen as disrespectful to the emperor. Even at the pinnacle of his success, Soichiro Honda remained the same independent-minded, convention-defying person he'd always been. So, what can we learn from Soichiro Honda's remarkable journey? First, formal education isn't everything. Honda had minimal schooling, but he had an insatiable curiosity and willingness to learn through doing. When he needed specific knowledge, as with the metallurgy for his piston rings, he went back to school. But his primary education, it came from hands-on experience. Second, persistence isn't just about trying the same thing over and over. It's about being willing to try, fail, learn, and adapt as many times as necessary. Honda didn't just hammer away at problems. He studied them, he understood them, and he resolved them methodically. Third, catastrophic setbacks don't have to end your journey. They can be the beginning of a new, possibly even better path. Honda's pivot from piston rings to motorcycles came out of necessity, but it led to his greatest success. Fourth, even strong leaders need to listen. Honda's willingness to eventually abandon his beloved air-cooled engines in favor of water-cooled designs showed that his commitment to making the best products ultimately trumped his own personal preferences. And finally, success comes from seeing opportunity where others only see problems. In post-war Japan, Honda saw a nation desperate for affordable transportation. With the Civic, he saw a world that would soon be hungry for fuel-efficient cars. In both cases, he positioned his company to meet the needs that others hadn't fully recognized yet. Soichiro Honda died in 1991 at the age of 84, leaving behind a legacy that extends far beyond the company that bears his name. He showed that innovation isn't just about having brilliant ideas, it's about having the courage and the persistence to see those ideas through, especially when they don't work out the first time, or the second, or the 47th. His life reminds us that the path to creating something meaningful is rarely straight or smooth. It's oftentimes messy, filled with detours and dead ends. But if you're willing to embrace those failures, learn from them, and keep moving forward, then there's almost no limit to what you can achieve. As Honda himself put it, instead of being afraid of the challenge and failure, be afraid of avoiding the challenge and doing nothing. This is Seth signing off, and this has been another episode of Made. Remember, the next time you face a setback, you're not failing. You're just collecting data for your next attempt. Until next time.